Grand Admiral Xelthera's crystalline appendages shimmered with barely contained agitation as she reviewed the application before her. The document, displayed in the quantum holographic interface of her office at the Galactic Elite Military Academy, GEMA, represented either the biggest mistake or the most brilliant decision in the institution's 12,000-year history. "You cannot be serious about this, Director Venn," she said, her translucent form pulsing with waves of deep indigo. A clear sign of distress among the crystalline collective. A human. At GEMA. Director Venn, a towering figure composed of pure energy contained within an ceremonial environmental suit, allowed their form to flicker in what passed for amusement among the ethereals. "The Galactic Council's new diversity initiative requires us to accept at least one candidate from every spacefaring species, Admiral. Even the less advanced ones. Less advanced." Xelthera's crystalline structure vibrated with what could only be described as a scoff. "The humans still think faster than light travel is an achievement. They celebrate when they manage to not blow themselves up during routine antimatter containment procedures." And yet, Venn's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. "Sarah Chen's test scores are interesting." Interesting. The Admiral's structure nearly fractaled with disbelief. She solved the quantum tactical simulator by introducing what she called a rubber duck debugging technique. The simulation I had to be rebooted 3 times. "Precisely why we should accept her," Venn countered. "When was the last time anything truly unexpected happened at GEMA?" The Academy, housed within an artificial quantum singularity at the heart of the galactic core, had long been the premier military training institution in known space. Its graduates went on to command fleets, lead special operations, and shape the very fabric of galactic security. Its motto, "Victory through superior evolution," spoke to its traditional belief that advanced species naturally made better military leaders. Sarah Chen's arrival 3 solar cycles later proved that traditions, like tactical simulations, were made to be broken. She stepped out of the quantum transport pod wearing the standard cadet uniform, which had required 17 modifications just to accommodate the fact that humans insisted on maintaining a solid form at all times. Her dark hair was pulled back in what her species called a ponytail, a term that had caused considerable confusion among the xenobiologists. "Welcome to GEMA," announced the orientation eye, its holographic form cycling through 17 different species in an attempt to find one that wouldn't confuse the human. It finally settled on something approximating a humanoid shape. "Please proceed to the quantum calibration chamber for standard particle alignment." "Quick question." Sarah raised her hand, an oddly primitive gesture that nonetheless caught everyone's attention. "Is this the kind of quantum calibration that assumes all particles should exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously? Because I brought my own calibration kit." She pulled out what appeared to be a plastic box containing various mechanical tools. The eye's holographic form flickered in confusion. "Cadet Chen, GDMA's quantum calibration processes are the most advanced in the galaxy. They are designed to align your fundamental particles with the Academy's quantum substrate." "Right." Sarah nodded, already opening her toolkit. "But has anyone ever tried just adjusting the macroscopic interface instead? Because I'm pretty sure humans work better when our particles stay in mostly the same dimensions." The AI paused, its quantum processors running through trillions of calculations per second. That would be highly irregular." "Story of my species," Sarah grinned, pulling out what appeared to be a wrench with LED lights attached to it. "We're basically walking irregularities. Now, who wants to help me recalibrate a quantum calibrator?" 3 quantum physics professors, who had been observing the exchange, spontaneously developed new theories about the nature of reality. The AI, for its part, experienced what could only be described as an existential crisis. As Sarah worked, humming something she called garage band music, Director Venn observed from their quantum-shifted vantage point. "You see, Admiral, she's been here less than 15 minutes, and she's already challenging our most basic assumptions. Admiral Zelthera's crystalline form emanated patterns that in human terms might be described as a migraine. That's precisely what worries me. She's not even trying to adapt to our methods. She's making our methods adapt to her. Exactly. Ven's energy form brightened. For 12,000 years, we've taught the same ways, used the same techniques, followed the same protocols. Perhaps it's time for something different. With a final adjustment to her modified calibrator, Sarah stepped back. The quantum calibration chamber hummed to life, its displays now showing readings that somehow made both more and less sense than before. "There we go," she announced proudly. "Now it should work for humans without trying to spread our atoms across multiple probability waves." I also added a cup holder. A cup holder. The AI's voice carried the weight of 12,000 years of dignity being confronted with something it couldn't quite process. "Trust me," Sarah patted the modified chamber. "When you're dealing with quantum mechanics, you're going to need coffee. Lots of coffee." As the human headed to her assigned quarters, leaving behind a wake of confused but intrigued faculty members, Admiral Zelthera turned to Director Ven. "This is going to be an interesting year, isn't it?" "Oh yes." Ven's energy form pulsed with what might have been anticipation. "I believe Cadet Chen is about to teach us far more than we'll ever teach her." In her quarters, Sarah unpacked her bags, including several more mysterious tools, and what appeared to be a plastic duck. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "time to show the galaxy what humans can do." She paused, then added with a grin, "But first, coffee." The Academy's AI, still processing the implications of the modified calibration chamber, made a note to study this coffee phenomenon. It had a feeling it would need to understand every possible advantage in the chaos that was surely coming. Combat Training Module 7 Alpha hummed with energy as 20 cadets from across the galaxy assembled for their first practical exercise. The chamber, a massive geodesic sphere composed of quantum-locked probability fields, could simulate any battle scenario imaginable. Today's lesson: tactical response to overwhelming odds. Combat instructors Extel, a being composed of pure martial knowledge, given form through military discipline, materialized in the center of the chamber. His presence immediately commanded attention from every species present, except, he noted with growing concern, the human. Sarah Chen was busy attaching something to her training suit's neural interface. It appeared to be, was that a gaming controller? Cadet Chen. Zixtel's voice resonated through all possible frequencies simultaneously. "What are you doing?" "Oh, hey, instructor." Sarah looked up, grinning. "Just making some modifications to better match human reaction speeds. The neural interface assumes we can process information at quantum speeds, which we can't. But it turns out the latency is pretty similar to old Earth video games, so..." "This is not a game, cadet." Zixtel's form flickered with what might have been irritation. "Today's exercise will pit you against a simulated Cardassian war fleet. The scenario is designed to be impossible to win through conventional means." "Ah." Sarah nodded sagely. "A Kobayashi Maru situation." "A what?" "Never mind. Old Earth reference. So, what are the victory conditions?" Zixtel's energy field pulsed with satisfaction. "There are none. The purpose is to experience graceful defeat, to understand that sometimes victory is impossible." "Yeah, that's not going to work for me," Sarah interrupted, making final adjustments to her modified interface. "Humans don't really do graceful defeat." Before Zixtel could respond, the simulation began. The chamber transformed into deep space, with each cadet commanding a small patrol vessel. The Cardassian fleet materialized, a vast armada of quantum-shifted battleships that could attack from multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The other cadets responded according to their training. The crystalline beings attempted to calculate optimal escape vectors. The energy-based species tried to phase shift into less dangerous dimensions. The gaseous cadets prepared to diffuse their consciousness across space-time. Sarah pressed what appeared to be the start button on her controller. Lee Jenkins, she shouted, her ship accelerating directly toward the enemy fleet. What is she doing? One of the crystalline cadets vibrated in horror. Cadet Chen, explain your actions, Zixtel demanded. Well, Sarah's voice came through as her ship weaved through the first wave of quantum torpedoes. I figured if the simulation is impossible to win through conventional means, we should try unconventional ones. Also, I noticed something about the quantum probability fields. Her ship suddenly split into multiple versions of itself, not through any advanced technology, but because she had somehow convinced the simulation that her vessel existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. That's not possible. Zixtel's form fluctuated with disbelief. You cannot simply decide to exist in quantum superposition. Tell that to Schrödinger's cat, Sarah replied cheerfully, as her quantum uncertain ship created chaos in the enemy fleet. The Kardashian vessels, programmed to respond to conventional tactical doctrines, couldn't process a target that refused to commit to a single reality state. But how? One of the energy-based cadets pulsed with curiosity. Well, Sarah explained while her ship continued its impossible maneuvers, I noticed the simulation uses quantum probability fields to generate reality, right? And these fields respond to observation and interaction, just like real quantum systems. So I figured, what if I just refuse to observe my own position? The simulation has to maintain all possible positions as equally valid. The enemy fleet, unable to target something that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, began to break formation. Sarah's impossible ship, or ships, took advantage of the chaos, launching what appeared to be. Are those cat videos? Zixtel asked in horror. Yep, Sarah confirmed. I figured if we're playing with quantum uncertainty, might as well use the internet's favorite quantum state inhabitants. Also, turns out quantum-shifted battleships really don't know how to handle pictures of kittens appearing in their probability matrices. The simulation ended not with the expected graceful defeat, but with the complete destruction of the Kardashian fleet. Half the enemy ships had retreated, their quantum processors overwhelmed by paradoxical cat memes. The other half had somehow been convinced they were actually space dolphins and were now swimming through the quantum foam of spacetime. As the chamber returned to its neutral state, Zixtel's form crackled with a mixture of outrage and fascination. Cadet Chen, that was totally awesome, Sarah suggested, powering down her modified controller. A complete violation of every tactical doctrine in the known galaxy, he finished. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and relied entirely on exploiting fundamental uncertainties in reality itself. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. Pretty sure it was, Sarah grinned. After all, isn't the point of tactical training to achieve victory? I mean, sure, I didn't do it the traditional way. But, traditional way. One of the gaseous cadets swirled in agitation. You turned a combat simulation into some sort of quantum physics joke. Exactly. Sarah's enthusiasm was undiminished. And that's why it worked. Everyone expects military engagements to follow certain rules, certain patterns. But humans, we're really good at thinking outside the quantum box. As the cadets filed out of the chamber, still buzzing with discussion about the impossible victory, Zixtel found himself experiencing an unfamiliar sensation. It felt suspiciously like having to revise 12,000 years of tactical doctrine. In her quarters later, Sarah added notes to what she called her gaming guide to quantum combat. The Academy's eye, which had been monitoring the simulation, began to understand why humans had survived despite their seemingly primitive technology. They hadn't evolved past their limitations. They'd simply turned those limitations into advantages. Meanwhile, in the faculty lounge, Director Venn reviewed the simulation records with growing amusement. You have to admit, Admiral, they said to Excelthera, she did technically achieve victory. The Admiral's crystalline form emanated patterns of resigned acceptance. Yes, by turning the most advanced military simulation in the galaxy into what she called a speedrun. Somehow, I don't think this is what the Galactic Council had in mind for their diversity initiative. Perhaps not, Venn agreed. But isn't that exactly why we needed it? 3 months into the academic year, GE&A faced its first real crisis in over 2 centuries. The quantum singularity housing the Academy began exhibiting signs of instability, something that, according to every known law of physics and engineering, should have been impossible. Warning signals blared through every dimension of the facility as Admiral Xelthera convened an emergency meeting in the quantum-shielded command center. Her crystalline form pulsed with barely contained anxiety as she addressed the assembled faculty and senior cadets. "The containment field is deteriorating," she announced, her words causing ripples of distress through the gathered beings. "Our best calculations suggest total collapse within 6 hours." "That's impossible," declared Chief Engineer Kvax, their plasma-based form roiling with agitation. "The quantum matrices are self-stabilizing. They literally cannot fail." "Tell that to the singularity," Sarah muttered from her position near the back of the room. As the only human present, she stood out not just for her solid form, but for her peculiar calmness in the face of impending doom. "Cadet Chen," Admiral Xelthera's tone carried a warning. "Unless you have something constructive to add." "Actually," Sarah stepped forward, pulling out her ever-present toolkit, "I might be noticing some weird readings in my quantum physics lab lately. The containment field isn't failing. It's being sabotaged." The room erupted in a cacophony of multidimensional protests and exclamations. "Sabotage at GEMA? It was unthinkable." "Explain," Director Venn commanded, their energy form intensifying with interest. Sarah pulled out her modified scanner, a device that looked suspiciously like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and an old gaming console. "See, everyone keeps saying the quantum matrices are self-stabilizing, right? But that's only true if you assume they're operating in normal spacetime." She projected a holographic display that somehow managed to represent 11-dimensional space in a way that didn't cause immediate headaches. "Someone's been introducing temporal paradox particles into the system. Tiny ones, barely noticeable, but they've been building up, creating microfractures in the quantum stability field." Temporal paradox particles. Chief Engineer Kvax's plasma swirled in confusion. "Those are theoretical. They only exist in human science fiction." Sarah grinned. "Yeah, we're kind of experts at imagining impossible things, which is why I recognize what was happening. Someone's trying to collapse the singularity by making it doubt its own existence." Admiral Xelthera's crystalline structure vibrated with realization. "The axiom purists. They'd been protesting our diversity initiative for months. But how did they get access to our systems?" "They didn't," Sarah explained, making adjustments to her scanner. "They just introduced a simple paradox into the quantum substrate and let it replicate. Like a virus, but for reality itself. Pretty clever, actually. Evil, but clever." "Can you stop it?" Director Venn asked, their energy form pulsing with urgency. "Stop it? No." Sarah shook her head. "But I can give it an existential crisis of its own." Before anyone could stop her, Sarah had connected her modified gaming controller to the Academy's main quantum interface. The holographic displays immediately began showing what appeared to be. "Is that the entire history of human philosophy?" someone gasped. "Yep," Sarah confirmed, fingers flying over the controls. "If the paradox wants to make the singularity question its existence, let's give it some real questions to chew on. Descartes, Kant, Nietzsche, the whole gang's here. You're feeding philosophical treatises into a quantum singularity." Chief Engineer Kvax's plasma form flickered with disbelief. Along with every episode of The Good Place and a few choice Douglas Adams quotes, Sarah added, "Figure if something's going to have an existential crisis, might as well make it a productive one." The quantum displays began showing impossible readings as the singularity processed centuries of human contemplation about the nature of existence. The paradox particles, confronted with questions they weren't programmed to handle, began to destabilize. "It's working," Admiral Xelthera exclaimed, her crystalline form refracting patterns of hope. "The containment field is restabilizing." "Of course it is," Sarah nodded, still focused on her controls. The paradox was designed to make the singularity question whether it should exist. "I'm just helping it arrive at I think. Therefore I am." Quantum addition. As the crisis alarms finally fell silent, the assembled faculty stared at the human cadet who had just saved the Academy by teaching a quantum singularity about existentialism. Cadet Chen, Director Ven's energy form, pulsed with what might have been amusement. "I believe you've just revolutionized both quantum physics and philosophy in one afternoon." "Nah." Sarah began packing up her toolkit. "Just applied some basic human problem solving. If something's having an existential crisis, sometimes you just need to help it find meaning in the multiverse." Later, in an emergency faculty meeting, Admiral Xelthera faced an unusual dilemma. "How do we even classify this in our incident reports? Academy saved by improper use of human philosophy in entertainment media." "I suggest," Director Ven offered, their energy form brightening, "we classify it as proof that our diversity initiative was not just successful, but necessary. After all, who else would think to fight a quantum paradox with human philosophy? And television shows," the Admiral added dryly. "Especially television shows," Ven agreed. "Perhaps it's time we expanded our curriculum to include more unconventional approaches." Meanwhile, deep in the quantum core of the Academy, the singularity had achieved a stable state of self-awareness, developed a sense of humor, and was working its way through a reading list of human absurdist literature. It had also, much to the confusion of the maintenance AI, requested a coffee maker. The aftermath of the quantum singularity crisis sent shockwaves through GEMA's halls. Not physical shockwaves, they had plenty of those already, but institutional ones that threatened to reshape 12,000 years of military education tradition. Director Ven stood before the Academy Board, their energy form radiating conviction as they presented their proposal. "The evidence is undeniable. Cadet Chen's unconventional methods have not only succeeded but exceeded our most optimistic projections. I propose we integrate human problem-solving approaches into our core curriculum." The board chamber, a dodecahedral space that existed in several probability states simultaneously, filled with murmurs of protest. Administrator Zixvac, one of the oldest quantum beings in the galaxy, manifested their disapproval in 7 dimensions at once. "Preposterous," they declared. "Are we to teach our cadets to solve quantum equations with, what did she call them, rubber ducks? If it works?" "Yes," Ven responded firmly. "We've become so focused on advanced technology that we've forgotten something fundamental. The best solutions aren't always the most complex ones." Meanwhile, in Tactical Training Lab 7, Sarah was already revolutionizing things in her own way. She'd been asked to demonstrate her problem-solving methods to a group of junior cadets, much to the chagrin of traditional instructors. "Okay, so here's the thing about quantum entanglement," she explained, setting up what appeared to be a game of cat's cradle with glowing quantum strings. "Everyone gets caught up in the math, but sometimes you just need to visualize it differently. Think of it like this. If 2 particles are best friends, they're going to text each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are." A crystalline cadet's structure vibrated with confusion. "But that's not how quantum mechanics works." "Actually," Sarah grinned, manipulating the quantum strings into an intricate pattern, "it kind of is. We just usually describe it with way more equations and way fewer emojis. But look, when I do this." She twisted the strings, creating a perfect model of quantum telecommunication that somehow involved cat memes. The Academy's eye, which had been monitoring the session, immediately began updating its teaching protocols. Somehow, Sarah's simplified explanations were resulting in higher comprehension rates than 12,000 years of traditional instruction. Not everyone was pleased with these developments. A group of traditionalist faculty members, led by Professor X. Thull of the Advanced Quantum Combat Department, gathered in secret to discuss their concerns. This is unacceptable. X. Thull's plasma form roiled with indignation. She's turning the galaxy's most prestigious military academy into some sort of human entertainment center. Did you see what she did to the combat simulator? Another instructor added. She reprogrammed it to generate scenarios based on something called action movies and video games. Yes, a third voice chimed in. And the cadets' combat effectiveness has increased by 47%. That's not the point. X. Thull insisted. We're losing our traditions, our dignity, our... They were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Director Venn. Our complacency. They suggested mildly, their energy form filling the room with gentle but unmistakable authority. The conspirators scattered across multiple dimensions in surprise, only to find Venn present in all of them. I understand your concerns, Venn continued. Change is difficult, especially after 12,000 years of consistency. But consider this. What is the purpose of military education? To maintain our superior tactical and strategic capabilities. X. Thull responded automatically. No, Venn corrected. It's to improve them. And that, my friends, sometimes requires us to admit that our way isn't the only way. Back in her quarters, Sarah was working on her latest project, a modification to the Academy's quantum probability calculator that would allow it to factor in what she called the Murphy's Law coefficient. See, she explained to her roommate, a being of pure mathematics who had initially requested a transfer, but now found themselves fascinated by human approaches. Traditional quantum calculations assume particles will behave according to probability. But humans know that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, usually in the most interesting way possible. That's not a scientific principle, her roommate pointed out, their mathematical form swirling with both confusion and intrigue. Maybe not, Sarah agreed, making final adjustments to her device. But I bet you it's more accurate than current prediction models. To everyone's surprise, except Sarah's, it was. The Murphy's Law coefficient improved combat situation predictions by 73%, simply by assuming that the universe had a sense of humor. Director Venn, reviewing the latest test results, turned to Admiral Xelthera. You know what the most remarkable thing is. She's not just solving problems, she's changing how we think about them. The Admiral's crystalline form shimmered with reluctant agreement. Yes, though I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing. Did you see her latest proposal? She wants to add something called brainstorming sessions to tactical planning. Apparently, it involves pizza. And yet, Venn noted, preliminary tests show it improves strategic creativity by 89%. That's what worries me, Xelthera admitted. What if she's right? What if all our advanced technology and evolved consciousness isn't as effective as pizza and rubber ducks? Then, Venn's energy form brightened. We learn. After all, isn't that what education is supposed to be about? As if to punctuate their point, a cheer erupted from the nearby training room, where Sarah had just taught a group of energy beings how to use human sports strategy to improve their tactical formations. The fact that she'd done it using a modified version of beer pong, with quantum probability fields instead of beer, was either brilliant or horrifying, depending on who you asked. The Academy's eye, which had been quietly observing everything, added another note to its ever-growing file on human teaching methods. Effectiveness of instruction appears to be inversely proportional to its apparent seriousness. Further research required. Also need to requisition more pizza. Graduation day at GEMA had always been a solemn affair, steeped in 12,000 years of tradition. This year, however, something was different. For one thing, the quantum probability field was vibrating with what could only be described as anticipation. For another, someone had somehow convinced the Academy's AI to play pomp and circumstance across all 11 dimensions simultaneously. Sarah Chen stood among her fellow graduates, her modified ceremonial uniform, somehow incorporating both the traditional quantum-shifted insignia and what appeared to be LED lights arranged in a pattern that spelled Class of 2025 rules. When viewed from the correct dimensional angle, "This is highly irregular," muttered Administrator Sixpack, their quantum form fluctuating with disapproval. "Everything about this year has been irregular," Admiral Xelthera responded, her crystalline structure showing signs of what might have been amusement. "Somehow, it seems appropriate." Before the graduation ceremony could begin, however, the Academy's warning systems activated. Red alert signals pulsed through multiple dimensions as Director Van materialized on the central platform. "We have a situation," they announced, their energy form crackling with urgency. "A quantum cascade event has been detected at the edge of the local group. If not contained, it could unravel the fabric of space-time itself." The assembled graduates immediately snapped to attention, their various forms shifting into battle readiness. This was no simulation. This was exactly the kind of crisis GEMA had been training them to handle. "Standard containment protocols are already failing," Venn continued. "We need new solutions immediately." All eyes, sensory organs, and quantum perception matrices turned to Sarah, who was already pulling out her toolkit. "Oh no," Professor Xthol's plasma form roided. "Surely we're not going to rely on human methods for something this serious." "Actually," Sarah spoke up, connecting her modified quantum analyzer to the Academy's main systems, "I think this is exactly what we need. Remember what I've been teaching about human problem solving?" She quickly pulled up a holographic display showing the quantum cascade event. It looked, as several faculty members noted with horror, suspiciously like a game interface. "See, we've been thinking about this all wrong," Sarah explained, her fingers flying over her controls. "Everyone's trying to stop the cascade by forcing it to behave according to standard quantum mechanics. But what if instead we—" She pressed a button, and suddenly the cascade pattern was overlaid with what appeared to be— "Is that a crossword puzzle grid?" someone asked in disbelief. "Yep," Sarah confirmed. "Look, quantum mechanics is all about patterns and probabilities, right? And humans are really good at pattern recognition, especially when we make it fun. So if we treat the cascade like a puzzle—" She began filling in the grid, each entry somehow corresponding to a quantum probability vector. As she worked, the cascade's expansion began to slow. "This is ridiculous," Xfull protested. "You cannot solve a quantum apocalypse with games." "Why not?" Sarah shot back, still focused on her work. "The universe itself runs on game theory at the quantum level. We're just making it more obvious." To everyone's amazement, it was working. The cascade wasn't just stopping, it was beginning to reverse. But how? Admiral Xelthera's crystalline form vibrated with confusion. "Because," Sarah explained, making final adjustments, "sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to change how you look at it. Traditional quantum mechanics says this cascade should be unstoppable. But if you look at it like a human, as a puzzle to be solved rather than a disaster to be prevented, you start seeing new possibilities." The cascade finally collapsed completely, leaving behind nothing but a slight dimensional ripple and what appeared to be a high-score display. As the emergency signals faded, Director Van turned to address the assembled graduates. "I believe," they said, their energy form pulsing with pride, "this serves as a perfect final exam for all of you, particularly for what Kedet, no, Graduate Chen has been teaching us this year. That quantum physics is just a game," Xthul asked sarcastically. "That every problem has multiple solutions," Ven corrected, "and that sometimes the best one isn't the most advanced or traditional, but the one that dares to look at things differently." Sarah finally packed away her toolkit, the same one she'd arrived with, though now significantly modified with quantum technology and what appeared to be disco lights. "You know," she said to no one in particular, "humans have a saying, the most important thing is to never stop questioning. Is that some profound Earth philosophy?" Admiral Excelthera asked. Nah, Sarah grinned. Pretty sure it was on a bumper sticker, but it's still true. As the graduation ceremony finally proceeded, the Academy's AI added one final note to its file on human education methods. Conclusion. The true power of human problem-solving lies not in their technology or their knowledge, but in their ability to look at the most serious problems and ask, what if we tried something silly? Deep in the quantum core, the now philosophical singularity approved this conclusion and began planning improvements to its coffee maker. After all, it had learned from Sarah that sometimes the best way to understand the universe was over a good cup of coffee and a seemingly ridiculous idea. Director Venn, watching the first human graduate of GEMA receive her diploma, which existed simultaneously as a quantum data matrix and, at Sarah's insistence, an actual piece of paper, turned to Admiral Excelthera. You know, they said, we started this year thinking we were taking a risk by accepting a human. I'm beginning to think the real risk would have been not accepting one. The Admiral's crystalline form shimmered with what was definitely amusement now. Indeed, though I do have one concern. Oh, she's inspired the quantum singularity to take up philosophy, turned our combat simulations into video games, and taught an entire generation of the galaxy's future military leaders to solve problems with rubber ducks and pizza. And I'm pretty sure that means the galaxy will never be the same. Good. Venn's energy form brightened. After 12,000 years, it was about time for a change. As if to punctuate their point, Sarah's graduation cap, which she had somehow modified with quantum technology, launched into the air, split into multiple probability states, and treated the entire ceremony to a miniature fireworks display that somehow incorporated both advanced physics and cat memes. The Academy would never be the same. And that, as humans would say, was exactly the point.